the actual computer loads. Yay!
Didn't this happen last week?
So, yes, let's just hope this week it doesn't completely turn off halfway through. I tried to delete as many things as possible.
Kind of just crashed. Decided.
All right. So today we're talking about screenwriting techniques, particularly the value of a scene. I realized this was important when I gave a prompt. You guys said, "What is a scene?" And I was like, "That's a problem."
What?
So I had at least 5 people that asked me what a scene is. Okay, this is an issue. We got to discuss this. Beyond that, I think it's important to realize how to write a scene well, even if you do know what a scene is. Because whether or not if you don't know what a scene is, it's good to know what a scene is. If you do know what a scene is, it's important that you know how to write one well. So, no matter which scale of the spectrum you are, whether you didn't know what a scene is or you do know what a scene is, this will hopefully help you write better scenes. So it's helpful either way. First of all, we're going to define a scene for those of you who did not know what a scene was. It is a fundamental unit of storytelling, specifically defined by specific time and location where a particular action or interaction takes place. This is why when you stop in the middle of a movie or have a glitch and you have to go back to the scene selection screen, there are different scenes and they're all at different points in the movie. It's not just like forward and backward like on YouTube. It has scenes.
There are kind of like sections on YouTube also on some videos.
This is true. Yeah.
Like, some of the videos
Can be divided
like,
into sections.
to do something.
But that's the point, though. It's in some ways a different kind of scene. They're non-fiction scene. If you have like 5 steps to do blah, they'll sometimes have scene 1, step 1 kind of thing. And those are also a type of scene because they are defined by a specific unit of time, location, and an action or interaction that's taking place. In the case of a YouTube video, it's typically, this is the first step in how to make a clay sculpture or whatever.
Or like intro.
Yeah, or the intro bit, or yeah, they're all different things. You have the same units of storytelling in building and in story building. It's incredibly important, even more so in novel building than it is in nonfiction. So, first thing, you want to make sure that your scene does at least 2 out of 3 of these things. If it only does 1, you should probably exit or combine scenes. The reason why is because your scenes need to be able to stand on their own and have more importance than just fluff. This is when people are talking about your book's too slow, it feels a little boring in this area. That's typically because of fluff scenes. Not that there's anything bad. But exactly, fluff scenes can be cute, but those make great bonus material for when you publish your book, not in the book. Yes, question.
So, are the chapters like separating, or like each individual?
There are individual scenes in individual.
There are different
That is not the same.
chapters, but sometimes one scene can be a whole chapter.
True, one scene can be a whole chapter, but that does not mean a chapter is a scene. For example, with that definition, there have been times where in one chapter they go from the setting of a cave to the setting of the woods. Those are 2 separate scenes because they have 2 separate settings. So, chapter does not necessarily mean a scene, even though it can mean a scene. That's why chapters are so difficult to know where to divide. Mainly it's just for the sake of the reader not feeling exhausted. It's less of this is a scene and more just the reader's not like, I have 200 more pages in this chapter. That feels exhausting. Whereas if it's, I have 1 more page in this chapter, it feels better.
It's kind of like checkpoints.
Yes, exactly. It's more like a checkpoint than it is a scene. Although it can be. Alright, so out of the 3 things you want it to do, you want it to do 2 out of the 3. So first one we have is forward the plot. This one is incredibly important, and most people would argue all scenes should forward the plot. I actually will argue against that. Part of the reason why is because of the fact that sometimes you can't forward the plot and build your character at the same time. Sometimes you can. If you do it,
Like
but you can't always.
Like if you're doing the save the cat thing, then there's like the fun and games section.
Right, and then beyond that, even if you're doing something outside of structure, think of various examples like Percy Jackson. The scene where he wakes up and Annabeth's all like, you drool when you sleep. That isn't plot pivotal. This isn't important at all. It's funny as heck, though. The reason it's important is because it builds setting and character, which are the other 2. So it's important that you have at least 2 of these things. If you are just building character, that's not good. Axe it. If you're just building setting, that's boring. axe it. If you're just forwarding the plot, that's boring, axe it. You need at least 2 in every scene. Whether it's setting and character, setting and plot and character, you can combine them in any way that you want, but you need at least 2 of these. The reason why is because of the fact that then you get fluff scenes. Just setting is a fluff scene. Just characters, a fluff scene. Just plot, even if it isn't a fluff scene, it is certainly not as interesting if you aren't building character or setting with that. If you just have a white room syndrome, don't know what your character looks like, and are like, oh yes, plot, no one cares because they want to know what the character's like.
Like Ice Cream Sandwich, who just stands in a blank, endless white void.
Exactly. It's like, that's not helpful.
The animation YouTubers.
What do I need about this? And so what makes them care is the character, which is why you should try to fit character development in all your scenes. I say try because it's not always possible. Setting is important because if your character doesn't know where the heck they are confused. And we don't want confused readers. Confused readers equal shut the book, put it down, go away, never read it again, and that's bad. But you also, like I said, don't want to ignore setting and character and just do plot, because if you're just telling a story with no character development and no setting, we have no reason to care about your story. It's kind of like when someone says, the little boy went and bought a pony. I don't give a crap. But if you say that you built up this setting where he's super, super poor and you feel for this kid and he's always wanted to be a horseback rider, and then his grandfather saves up all of his money and buys him a horse. Now I care, right? The previous one was just plot. What happened? No setting, no character. We don't care.
Oh,
But once you add the character and add the setting, or even just the character or just the setting, all of a sudden you are invested. Yes, question or thought.
We had like a teacher demo.
Yeah.
Because our teacher was getting promoted, and so she wasn't a teacher
Awesome.
anymore. It was sad for us, but
Fair enough. But
we had
awesome for her.
we had a teacher demo, and he was assigned to teach about like writing devices, and he wrote this story, and he's like, guys, I wrote this really great story, and then he was like, Max lost his dog. Max put up posters to try and find his dog. Max found his dog, and he was like, isn't it great? And we were all like, and he was like, so what's missing?
Hey, what's missing here? That is a beautiful plot. I don't know who Max is. I don't know where Max is. I don't know why Max even cares about this dog. Like, I need to know more about them. That's why it's important you have at least 2 of these things. If you have setting and plot, typically this is a narration scene. This is where if you have a narrator, your narrator's going, the wind whistled through the trees, cool things like that. But then if you have setting and character, you might have the guy being like, ugh, I hate rain or something like that. So then you get to know the character, but then you also know the setting is raining. This is why it's important you have at least 2 out of the 3. Again, some publishers will argue that you're using in all scenes, but that's not necessarily true, as I just established with the Annabeth scene, and as I'm going to establish with further scenes. For example, the Santa Claus giving them gifts scene in Narnia. Later it matters, but in that moment, it's just like, cool, we met Santa and got gifts. Like, it builds character, builds setting, because you now know that Santa Claus lives in Narnia. Cool, setting building. But then it also builds character because the gifts they get are something that they all enjoy, something that they all like, something that all foreshadows who they are going to become. You have this beautiful setting and character building. There is no plot building. It's but it's beautiful. So if you have a publisher that says must build plot in every scene, they're probably not that great of a publisher. You'll probably end up with a super rushed book because you want to build some of that setting and character separately from the plot. All right. Moving forward. Now, the reason why a lot of people say it must contain plot is because they're getting confused with another element, and that is conflict. Every scene must contain conflict. Now that is true. Absolutely. If you have a scene with and it can be internal or external conflict, or it can even just be a very, very simple conflict. Yes.
So in Annabeth's scene,
Yeah.
Could the conflict be counted as like him being hurt and
him being embarrassed? Yes. And being like, this cute chick just told me I drool in my sleep. I'm super embarrassed. That's a conflict for him. That's an internal conflict. Exactly. And then with the Narnia scene, the conflict is they realize that even though Santa's giving them all these presents, he's giving them gifts that are meant to be used in war. And they're realizing this isn't good. We are going to be here for a while. And not only are we going to be here for a while, but we might need these weapons of war and healing. This is not good. Even though they're happy in that moment, they have that internal conflict. Need a bow and arrow? Actually, need a potion that might save someone's life? That says we're in deep trouble. And just before Santa Claus shows up, they all think they're about to be attacked. Also conflict. So you don't necessarily have to have it be intense conflict. It can even, like I said, just be internal conflict of I'm super embarrassed because this cute girl just said I. But you need to have something that is compelling us to keep reading. If it's just like, I had a fantastic day, why do I care? If I'm your best friend, maybe I'll care, but I don't care if you had a fantastic day if I don't know anything about you.
That's why. That's why I love drama in like books and movies and shows, but I hate drama in real life. It's
Exactly.
Like, stop.
Because of the fact that in a book you're like, oh my gosh, what's going on? But in real life you're like, I'm already dealing with enough. I'm good. But in books, it's important to have a little bit of drama, a little bit of embarrassment, a little bit of struggle, because that's what makes us keep reading. Like I said, if you're just like, the character had the best day ever, you don't care. You know that character, and you're like, they deserve to have the best day ever. They've had a rough life. That makes you go, I care about them. Or alternatively, if they're the enemy and it's like, I had the best day ever, you're like, screw you, buddy. We'll sack you, the villain. That also makes us have conflict, right? In a different way. What makes us care about the characters is going to help present those conflicts. All right.
Oh man, I'm running out of space for my bullet points.
So,
I'll just make some new
next
lines.
thing is action.
Oh my goodness, I always do that.
Every scene needs to have the character taking action. They can't just be pushed around by fate. Let's be real here. Even if fate exists, even if we're all fated to die someday, fated to walk to this specific spot and get kicked in the face, I don't know.
What?
Like,
I hope I'm not
whatever
fated.
is your fate, we don't want to believe that, right? Who wants to believe that they have to, by destiny, walk into a thorn bush? Like, no one wants to believe that. But that's the beauty of Percy Jackson, is even when fate tells him to do that, he says, screw you, fate, I'm going to try to carve my own destiny, right? So, point being, action, whether it's additional, is what's going to also help drive each of your scenes. And typically, this is what helps define a scene. When the action is finished, then the scene is over. So, for example, a physical scene could be two people sparring, and one person's like, "You're getting a little better," and they help them up. That's the end of scene. They finish of dueling. Or emotionally, if it's but I'm in love with you. That confession of love and scene, emotional finished. And so typically it's about a paragraph, sometimes even two paragraphs at most long when it comes to scenes. So,
scared me.
with physical and emotional actions in a scene, you can also have both. You can have, like, maybe they're dueling, and in the middle of the duel, they're like, I don't want to hurt you because I'm in love with you. You can have both. Where you have physical action and emotional action happening. However, there does need to be some sort of action in the scene. If the person's just like, yes, I will marry you. No emotions, no actions, just stands there. Ragdoll. That's not a person. That's a cardboard cutout.
Like the guy from the Lorax, what's his name? The like technically villain guy. What's his name? Does anybody remember? His throw hair. That's his name.
But the reason you want to drop kick him is because he's kind of just like cardboard cutout of everything that is wrong with the industry.
Better villain in my opinion.
But
and there's even ways you can improve
keep
him.
in mind, though, that the best characters have emotional and physical actions that drive them and drive those scenes. And sometimes they can even be simple as like two characters are playing chess, and at the end of the characters gives them this little king figure, and you know that they're about ready to overthrow the kingdom. And so you're like, this has this deeper meaning than just chess.
Well, that's
he
a
knows.
cool idea.
Like, so you can have action that is both emotional and physical at the same time. Typically, I will say though, if you have actionless characters, the reason is because your character's too flat. So if your characters are having trouble having action, either your character's too flat, them on yourself, and therefore you already know the action, but you're not telling us what the action is. It's fine to get base a character off yourself. The problem is when you know them so well that you don't tell the reader what the heck is going on.
That's why it's helpful to have someone else look over your work.
Exactly, because then they can say, okay, I know that they exist, but I don't give a crap about this person. It's like, well, it's because of X, Y, and Z. It's like, but you don't say that. It's like, oh, I don't say that. Yes, question.
So that's probably really helpful for me because the person in my like book series I'm making to show friends and family or whatever, it's based off of my brother.
Yeah, and you already know your brother, so you're already like, I know what he would do, I know how he'll act,
And then
you need to tell other people why he's acting.
and
this
then
way,
I
why
that book series, he doesn't see any of it because it's him. So
right, and so it's exactly if you're
Does he
reading
know that it's based off
something.
yeah, it's the title literally has its name.
Oh.
But anyway, so if you're doing something like that, like based off of yourself or a family member, just make sure that you have someone else double check your work and that they look at it and go, hey, so I know they're crying in this scene, but I don't know why they're crying. Like, tell us why they're crying, and then you can be like, oh, X, Y, and Z happened to them when they were little, and so that's why they're crying. And you're like, okay, that's why I care. Moving on to the next thing, pacing. This is the reason why scenes matter. If you have a ton of fast-paced scenes right in a row, that's going to equal a super rushed plot, and that's not good.
And that gets confusing.
It gets problematic. It feels too like there's no build up. Part of the reason you have this whole plot structure here like this is because of this section. If your pacing is too fast, it literally just goes and that's not a plot arc. That's just the blip. Yes.
Then there's the complete opposite, which is the One Piece pacing. Literally
So
many
but that's the thing, though, is actually One Piece is incredibly well paced. The reason why is because of the fact that
In
they
the
have
manga or
just
the
as
anime?
many. They have just as many of these episodes as they do these episodes and these episodes. These episodes, they make sure every aspect of the arc is well built instead of just being like episodes here and one episode here, and then we'll have one episode here, and then like to get super rushed plotting. And you're just like, wait. They just defeated the villain in one episode when it took them 5 to build up to it? No. No.
You need to have a good epic battle.
I think
Exactly.
it's a Dragon Ball scene where like the guy's like, it's gonna explode in 5 minutes. Hello. And they spend 5 episodes fighting, and I'm like,
5 episodes, and you're like, dude, that was 5 minutes. What do you mean? And then there's that problem too, where you're too slow. Where you're like, hey, it's gonna take 24 hours before we can find this kidnapper or whatever, and then they'll disappear forever. And then you're like taking 500 pages in a book to do those 24 hours. Like, no, that's just not realistic. So with pacing, you need to keep in mind that you have just as many fast-paced scenes as slow-paced scenes. This is why things like the Percy Jackson Annabeth drooling scene are important, because of the fact that it made it so that you went from super fast-paced, he's running from all these monsters trying to get safe, to learning about Camp Half-Blood, relaxing in Camp Half-Blood, making friends in Camp Half-Blood. It kind of has all these character building moments without building up the plot too intensely too quickly. If they just went from boom, you're in Camp Half-Blood, boom, now you gotta go find this lightning bolt, boom, now you gotta like that too much. The book would be this thin and it would be boring as heck. Because you'd be rushing through all the good stuff. That's another problem that a lot of people have, where they rush through the good stuff. They'll be like, let's talk about how this character likes hot chocolate for 5 chapters. But then the climax, 2 pages. And you're like, whoa. I wanted to see them fight the bad guy more than I cared about their hot cocoa taste. So it's important to know where to draw the line. You can't have no slow scenes because then your plot will be thin as water. Many slow scenes because then it will be thick as stew and people can't get through it. Yes.
I have an example of a fast to a slow scene.
Okay.
So like in Style, which is my favorite book series.
Pretty fantastic. I agree.
And there's a scene in like the last book where they're getting attacked by the villain, and well, the villain's like little buddies.
Yeah.
And it's like, and then they're fighting them, and then all of a sudden the ground opens up, and this dwarf basically takes them into his magical hideout, and so they're safe from the bad guys for a little bit, but they still have to defeat them.
Right,
So
and
it's
so
like,
there's still that tension and pressure, but you have a slower scene.
yeah, so it's like fast paced, and then to slow pace, and they're just kind of planning their next move.
Exactly. There you go. It's kind of similar to the Narnia scene with Santa Claus, where they're running away from these bad guys, and then it's like, oh, we're safe, we're okay. It's actually kind of fun, and they can relax for a little bit. Yes.
What is happening?
We're right next door to the bathroom,
So
so
there-
small children scream when they dry their hands. It's
Oh,
normal.
that
I-
was not what I was.
I just hate children screaming, and
It's terrifying.
But anyway,
and also so like the in the art of cliffhanging, you want to have like some things that are like there's like a bunch of build up, and then like if there something happens and like a chapter ends and you're like I need to keep reading because it's like there's a cliffhanger, but other times you need to like have like a safe place or whatever.
yes,
So then you
exactly.
don't keep having to read so much and exhaust yourself.
Exactly.
In Keeper of the Lost Cities, I feel like every chapter ends on a cliffhanger.
I will say that is one weakness of Shannon Messenger. I'll go out and say it. I love Shannon Messenger. I love her books. That's a huge weakness of her. She needs to chill. She can't leave.
There is no chilling.
There is no chilling, and that's a problem. She needs to chill because your cliffhangers don't mean anything if you have a cliffhanger every chapter. If you start having a cliffhanger on every chapter, it's no longer like intense. It's just like, oh, another cliffhanger. Like, who cares anymore? If you want your cliffhangers to mean something, you've got to have equal amounts of cliffhangers and not cliffhangers. Otherwise, if you're constantly putting, for example, it's like those kids in spy thrillers and whatnot who are like, I never wanted to be a spy, but I just want to be a normal person. The reason they want to be a normal person is because they're on edge all the time. No one wants to be on edge all the time. And it's the same thing with cliffhangers. Your reader being on edge all the time can actually be really annoying for them and might even make them stop reading. And that's a problem. So make sure that you have equal amounts of cliffhangers to not cliffhangers. Granted, you want to make sure that the first few chapters are probably a smidge of a cliffhanger. You don't necessarily have to have them massive cliffhanger, but I would say at least give a little bit of a cliffhanger because if you resolve everything perfectly and everything's cozy and good, why do they want to keep reading past the first chapter? You got to give them a reason to keep going. So that's the next art of the scene. Beginning and end. So this is a very famous screenwriting technique that we talked about. But some people can't take it too far. So you want to make sure that you come in late enough that we are interested. Not necessarily in so late that we're like dropped in the middle of the action and have no idea who anyone is or what's happening. That's a problem. But you want to come in late enough that we're intrigued, that we're interested. For example, with Percy Jackson, we're starting in with him already being 12. We could have started with, him growing up and everything.
And
We're
seeing
not
the faces in the ocean.
Yes, and seeing the faces in the ocean and all these things. But instead we're starting with the day that he gets kidnapped by monsters. That's in late. That's late in his life. But you also want to get out of the scene early. Now, not so early that every chapter is a cliffhanger and it's frustrating, but you want to make sure that you end your scenes early enough that there's still intrigue, that there's still something curious going on, that your readers are still asking who, what, where, when, why, what's going on. They aren't just going like, and now they're sleeping peacefully and they're in a little cave safe from monsters. Why do we keep reading?
Could you theoretically end it with, and now they're sleeping in a cave worrying about what their next meal is going to be?
Exactly,
But
there
there's
you
something-
go.
yeah.
You have to have a conflict with that out early thing. If they're just perfectly safe and secure, why do we bother keeping on reading? But if they're in that cave going, I'm safe and I'm secure, but I'm starving, and I have no idea how to catch food, what am I going to do tomorrow? And then they pass out from exhaustion, that makes me much to read the next chapter, even if they're safe, even if there's no cliffhanger. That's not a cliffhanger. But it certainly makes me go, I wonder if they are going to survive. I wonder if they are going to be able to catch food. I wonder if they are going to starve to death. And that makes me want to keep reading. Same thing with the in late rule. This is why most first sentences end up being way too wordy because people don't start in late. They end up going like, okay, her name is Alicia and she's gonna be followed you. And it's like, okay, stop, chill, breathe. Start in late. Have it be where Alicia's fighting off a bunch of other warriors and she flips around, her black hair in the wind, and she slices someone with a sword. Now that's awesome, right? I'm intrigued. I know that Alicia's a fighter now. I know that she's outdoors. I know that she has black hair. I know about how tall she is based on how tall she is compared to the other warriors. This gives me a ton of context without being like, here's my whole life story in sentence one. That we don't need that all in sentence one. We need that maybe in sentence like 27. After she's done fighting all the warriors and she's like, ah yes, where I've grown up for, 13 years or whatever, That makes it so that we can just take a step back.
Have
Yes,
you
question,
seen
and then your question.
Have you seen the meme where it's like the person picturing it and then they get another piece of information and they're like, oh crap, now I have to change it all.
No, exactly. Yes.
And then they keep
yes.
changing it because
That
they
is
keep
a
getting more
frequent
information.
problem, and the reason why is because of scenes being not well written. Your scene just starts with, boom, here's all this information, but I don't tell you the important stuff. You got to make sure you're telling them the important stuff, but you're also not info dumping on them too. Info dumping leads to the reader just feeling like you chucked a snowball at their face, and they're like, ugh. But if you alternatively are like, here, you must lick this popsicle as slow as possible. That's equally bad. You want to make sure that they're able to enjoy themselves. Not that it's too slow, but not that it's too fast either. So, with your first sentence and with your scenes in general, make sure that you start in a smidge late. That you're not just info dumping on them and giving them, like, hi, here's all this information about my best character. And just drop everything on them. But you also want to make sure that you're not like looking at them and going, they have no idea what this character looks like until page 27. That's a problem. Maybe I was imagining them as a redheaded woman, and you're like, secretly, they're a black man. And I'm like, what? Like, that's a problem. That's a big problem. This is why first person has such a big problem. Because first person, people forget to describe their character until like page 27. And then the person's like, what?
I don't know how to describe the character in first person.
Let's address that then real quick, even though it has nothing to do with scenes. That's important.
Yeah.
So, exactly. You got to do it the same way you do it in third person. The only difference is that you say I. So, for example, in third person, it would be she tucked her curly black hair behind it. In first person, it's just I tucked my curly black hair behind my ear.
Okay.
Same thing, just the difference is I. I think the problem is people assume that people don't think those kinds of things. They don't think those kinds of things. This is a narration of them. And so as a result, it might be their suggestion, but it's never going to be fully accurate to what a person actually thinks. Because if we read a book that was fully, completely accurate to what a person actually thinks, you'd be bored and confused. Just think about your own thoughts for a second and be like, yes, let's directly translate this into a novel.
That's why it's hard for me to write first person. Because I feel like sometimes first person that I write can be so cringe. I'm like, that's not how people feel.
Like, there would be no scenery description.
No, exactly. There'd be no scenery description because you'd be thinking, I'm super anxious, I'm super this, I'm super that. Are people looking at me? Like, you're not thinking about, I'm in a beautiful library right now. And so that's why it's important to take a step back with the eyes. With first person, you want to do things like, I walked into the library. You're not thinking that, but you do walk into the library. Think of it as you narrating what you are doing from an outside perspective.
Oh, Percy kind of does that. And
Exactly.
Percy Jackson, because he's like, in the beginning, he's like, don't read this if you
Exactly.
feel something.
Yes. And so he's acknowledging that he is narrating his own life from a past point of perspective.
Yeah, because he often does foreshadowing for himself. He's like, I had no idea how wrong I would be.
Yes, exactly. And so it makes it from a future perspective. And that's really important. Kind of look at it the same way you would with a movie. If you were to narrate the movie using first person, how would you describe it? For example, I walked into Hogwarts. Ah, on my face as I stare all around me. Like if Harry Potter was in first person, it would probably sound like that. It'd be weird because it's third person, but theoretically it could have been written in first person. Moving forward, though, back to scenes and whatnot. With a scene, you want to make sure that your scenes are, like I said, in late, out early, but not in too late or out too early. Typically, the gauge of if it's out too early is the reader confused too much? There's a little confusion being like, I wonder what she's going to do next. Or, I don't know who just snuck up on her. That's interesting.
Confusion,
But
I have no idea what's going on. And other
that's the problem. Yes.
I don't know what's going on, but I want to know more.
Exactly. I don't know what's going on, but I want to know more is good. But just, I don't know what's going on is bad.
To the point that they don't want to read it.
Exactly. If they're sitting there going, I don't know what's going on, I'm confused, what's going on? That's going to make them want to stop reading. But if they go, I'm a little confused about what's going on with this character, but I know enough that I want to keep going. You kind of got to do a Hansel and Gretel thing. You got to leave a little breadcrumb trail for your readers. You don't just shove a loaf of bread in their mouth. You leave a little breadcrumb trail. Yes.
So I've tried some books, but then I stopped reading it because I'm like, wait, which person is which?
Yes,
because,
that can be confusing too if they don't make it clear.
Like if there's like 4 people,
yes,
and
too many
they're
characters
like
in the beginning can be a problem too.
Yeah, especially but it was kind of like the third book, but so it was kind of a little confusing.
Yeah.
Though, it also had a recap and stuff. It just like if there was like a bunch of like 2 boys and 2 girls, like and like
they act too similar. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and so then I'm like, wait, who is who?
Yes, you want to make sure that you A, don't introduce too many characters at once in a scene, and B, if you do introduce a ton of characters, you only name the ones that are important. C, you make sure they aren't too similar. If you have Krista and Chrissy and Crystal, don't. We're going to be confused by page 1. We're going to be like, which one's Chris? Which one's Chrissy? Which one's Crystal? I don't know.
That's like my dad, because I had 3 siblings, and I had 2 siblings that had the same like suffixes, like Bailey and Kenzie and Sadie, and my dad's like, who are you guys?
It can be too much. Exactly. It's just too much. And so you got to make sure that even if they start with the same letter, it can be too much sometimes. Like Arturo and Adam. Those are distinctly different, but because they both start with A, it makes it so people go, wait, and they second guess themselves. Yes, question.
I was reading this book. It was very northern, Vikingish,
Yeah.
And a lot of the names were starting with A, and like I'm confused. Astrid, Arnold, a bunch of names.
Yes, I think it's mainly because of the fact that a lot of people can't pronounce the ones that don't start with A, and so they're just like, here's all the easy ones to pronounce, and I'm like, but then I don't know who anyone is. So I agree. That is a common problem.
There's a book I have here that the characters are very, Viking.
Yeah.
And I did a lot of research for me to find names that are different from each other.
Yes.
No, it took a lot of research.
It's important.
So Viking names are probably similar.
If you're doing cultural names, make sure that A, it's pronounceable to the average reader, but B, also make sure that you do your research and don't just pull up babynames.com and look at the first 3 A names. Like, look deeper. There are a lot of easily pronounceable Nordic names that are a lot of fun, especially because of the fact that a lot of them like to name their kids after gods and goddesses. And so, like, Odin was a common name. Floki was a common name because they just added F in front of Loki.
That's
yep,
like
literally, they were
Loki.
Yep, they were just literally like, let's just add it, or even Woden was a popular one. Add
Woden.
W in front of Odin. And so they'd basically just be like, we're going to add another letter in front of a god's name. That was very common. And so it's kind of funny because a lot of people assume, oh, they have to be highly unpronounceable. No, they don't. They don't have to be highly unpronounceable. And they don't have to all start with A either. I agree. That's a problem.
There's a first name of a Japanese character, and his name is Yu. Literally Y-U-U.
Yeah, see, there you go. You can find cultural names that are very simple. Question?
It's kind of like a comment, though.
Okay.
So, if you add like names that are similar, if at all, at least if do like the add one in at a time, like do
Yes.
if you do it
Space
at
them
all,
out.
like like have do the main character if it starts with an N or if it's similar with another N name, like put one at the start, like for the main
And
character.
then one like a quarter of the way through the book.
Oh,
Yes,
or
I agree.
even like half,
Yes.
or maybe even in the next book
Yeah.
if you're.
You don't add a ton of
Oh,
similar named characters
and
all at once.
If it's like an adventuring party or something, and they all start with V, don't have like Victor and Vincent and Vinyea and all the other people
exactly.
right in the same thing.
Even if it's part of a joke or a comedic effect, in that case, then just acknowledge that no one knows who they are, and they're just like, you! Yes.
You know, a little while ago, I read Pride and Prejudice, and it was so awesome.
Oh my
Yes.
goodness.
With the sisters, they introduced all the sisters.
Yes.
all at once.
Really?
It was so freaking
I feel like classic books do that a lot. They're like, yes,
Yep.
this is the person, this is the person. I'm like, I don't need the whole family tree.
Who's this? Yes.
They give you the whole family tree, and it's
Yep.
They did.
And we
exactly.
give the important ones.
Yeah, and even if
like
they
I don't want to know
Yes,
who
exactly.
her great uncle is.
yes, and even if they are all important, do it slowly. If you do
Maybe
it
introduce them when they
it's
become
too
important.
exactly. Introduce them as they become important instead of just being like, there's Tim and Bob and Joe and Jimmy and Slimmy and doing it. It's like
Jimmy and Flo.
exactly. Why? What do we need to know about their names? Who cares?
Yeah, I remember when I was reading Keeper of Lost Cities,
Yeah.
I was like so confused with the names. Like, how do you pronounce that?
Literally,
And the
They had a few
There's
that
so
were
many ways to pronounce those
so
names. It's not okay.
they definitely had a handful that I was like, oof, I
You
don't know how
meet
to
a
pronounce that.
person who likes it, and then you're like, so how do you pronounce that?
No, it's true. And then it's sad because then if they're cultural names like Japanese names, then they're pronouncing them wrong, and then you're like, but that's not right. And
Oh,
yeah, then it's hard.
my
But
friend
anyway.
is not very good at pronouncing Japanese names, and I love anime, and I always talk about it to her, and she's like, "Who is that?"
You're like, I'm just pronouncing it right. Anyway, it can cause conflict, as I know with Cinder. It's Aiko, it's not Eco.
Wait, there's an I what?
Anyway, there's a robot. Her name is Iko. In Chinese, it is pronounced Aiko, but even the author pronounced it Eco, and it's wrong. But anyway, sorry, Chris Meyer, if you ever see this, I doubt you will, but I'm mad at you because you won't pronounce your own name right. All right, so moving on. Back to the point. The point is, when you're building a scene, you want to make sure not to overwhelm your readers. You want to give them a little bit of information, a little bit of action, and just enough to keep going. But you don't want to just dump a whole bunch on their lap. And especially if it's the first scene in your book. Info dumping, not so good. And yes, you want to make sure you know what the setting and the character look like. 100%. And it's hard, especially in a short story or something like that, to build up character swiftly. However, the best way to do it is to take a paragraph. Don't do it all in the first chapter.
Oh,
Don't do it all in the first sentence. Take a paragraph. Take even a couple paragraphs. I mean, don't wait till page 27, but
you could probably like have them like in a short story as they're like doing stuff. You could have the character development happen through that, whether dialogue
Exactly.
or thoughts or actions.
Absolutely.
Or something.
I would highly recommend that you guys, speaking of which, I would highly recommend that you guys look at the grand prize winner of last year for the, it ended up being an adult, but honestly it was a close call. There was a lot of great entries. And part of what she does is she describes the character all in one page. Not in one paragraph, not in one sentence, all in one page. She starts out not even with anything to do with what the character looks like. She just starts out with the fact that this character loves to read romance books and eat cheese and crackers. It seems random, but the way she phrases it with the sass and the flair makes you go like, I like this character. This character's interesting. I'm curious what's going to go wrong now because everything seems perfect. Because there's also that element to that where if you're like, I'm having the perfect day, you're like, that seems like a trap, right? Have you ever had a character be like, "This day's fantastic," and you're like,
And you're always like, don't say that.
"Don't
bro.
say it, you jinxed it, bro." And so she starts basically with this character saying, "I'm gonna have the perfect day of staying home, reading romance books, and eating cheese and crackers." And then the second sentence, her sister comes in and is like, "We're going on a double date." She's like, "No, social. I don't want to."
And me and my friends, I'm like, Oh, okay.
Exactly. And so it makes it more interesting, but we also get the description of what she looks like and what the setting is like and what her sister looks like all in that first page. She doesn't just dump all of it in the first sentence or even the first paragraph. She takes a whole page to develop that. Now, you don't want to wait too long and be like, page 5, we now know that she has black hair. And it's like, okay, but what if I imagined her as blonde? That's going to throw me out of the story. So make sure that your scenes build, but do it slowly. Don't smack them. Yes.
I remember I started reading it, but in Michael Bay when I started, maybe I skipped a sentence or missed something or forgot, but I still don't know how Michael Bay looks like.
No, that actually is a problem because of the fact that he technically is on the cover of every book. He didn't do a great job of describing him. I will be frank. He did a way better job describing every other character than he did Michael himself. Yes, exactly. So you don't actually know what he is. And later he talked about how it was a metaphor because any guy could imagine that they were Michael, and I'm like, I don't care.
I've never
Just give
read
me a
Michael
description.
Bay, but I feel like he would have black hair based on the
No, yeah,
name.
I will say based on his parents, I imagined him with darker hair and fair skin. But I did say darker hair. I didn't say black. So I agree with you. I'm like, I don't know whether it's black
I
or
don't
brown.
think he would be blonde. I don't
No.
think.
Oh gosh, no. I can't picture that. But
I
anyway.
caused a visceral reaction.
Also, I also feel like it would be just too much. The electric kid has blonde hair, like cheesy much, but anyway. So back to the point. With screenwriting, the reason it's important to learn about screenwriting, whether or not you're writing plays or movies, is immaterial because people know how to catch people's attention with movie. Because with a movie, you have a couple seconds. If you don't catch their attention, they're out.
That's because
People will take slower time.
It's because humans have the attention span of
Exactly.
7 seconds less than a goldfish.
But anyway, point being though, with books, people are typically a little more patient. I say typically because not everyone is. But that's why it's important to learn screenwriting, because then you have a little bit more time and a lot more refined skill. And then you can use that to the best of your advantage. Most screenwriters become novelists because they realize it's a little easier to catch the reader's attention while using the exact same amount of skills. In fact, the writer of The Hunger Games was a screenwriter first. She wanted to write screenplays.
Really?
And then she became a novelist. Yep. She has a degree in screenwriting.
Wait, like
So-
movies?
So no, she wrote the books first, and she started writing books because she got a degree in screenwriting, and then decided she wanted to write novels instead.
What is screenwriting like the definition?
Movies and plays.
Okay, so that's what I thought. I'm
Yep.
taking a
But that's
playwriting
another
class.
reason why the movies are also probably better, is because they're easier to adapt to a screen because they were written by a screenplay artist. And so she knew, hey, in a movie, this is how this would play out. And so there are some things that cannot be adapted as well to a movie screen that she did. But they were small and few and in between. That's why the adaptation was so seamless. And so it can be also beneficial for you guys because if you learn screenwriting techniques and adapt them, if you ever get lucky enough to have your thing made into a movie, it will be more accurate because of the fact that you already have 99% of it down to a screenplay standard. And you won't be having to cut stuff and chop stuff out and lose valuable scenes because there's just not enough time
Like that scene
in the scene.
in Harry Potter. I'm trying not to spoil anything. In like the second book with Sirius and Ron and Harry.
Oh yeah. There's a lot of great scenes that get lost because in screenwriting that never even would have been written. Or it would have been written differently. And so as a result, you got to take into mind these different important aspects of first, like we said, just to recap, make sure that all of your scenes have either plot, character, or setting the scene, and make sure they have at least 2 of one of those. You either need to set the scene, develop the character and the plot, etc. Mix and match, however you will. They also need to all have a physical or emotional action. They all need to have an internal or external conflict. And last but not least, they need to be an well-paced within the scene and outside of the scene when you merge it with other scenes. You need to make sure that there is a flow of things instead of just flat or just straight up a cliff. That's also bad. Too much tension and your reader feels like they're going to explode. All right. So I'm gonna wrap things up. Do you guys have any other questions about scene writing in particular? We good? Okay. Then I'm just going to wrap up with, remember, there is a summer contest going on. I know most of you guys are less busy during the summer, so I hope that we'll have more teen entries this time around. That will be exciting. Because during the school year, I know we typically get a little bit of a smaller batch size, so I'd love to see as many people enter as possible. The limit is 3,000 words. We had to cut it down because we had so many adult entries and teen entries during the summer. But keep in mind that the prompt is any genre you want. You can write any genre you want, no restriction. But the prompt is that you have to write about an artist and something in their world that they discover that is new about their world. So whether it's a musician discovering that every time they play a certain song that something happens, or whether it's a sculptor who realizes that their sculptures come to life at night or something like that. Like you got just find something new about their world. And it doesn't have to be fantasy. It can be science fiction, it can be a murder mystery, it can be whatever you'd like, as long as it is about an artist discovering something new about their world. And the term artist, I will say, is pretty vague. However, keep in mind, don't go too far off the mark with it. We're thinking classical art forms like sculpture and music and painting. We're not thinking
What
like
about the banana taped to the wall?
I wasn't.
Still talking about it like 6 years after it happened.
I know, right? But anyway, so
I'm confused.
Yeah.
Somebody put it.
Anyway.
They taped a banana to the wall with duct tape, and
yeah,
then
but
now
they're
it's
like, this is
modern
art. Anyway,
Huh?
so I will say I will even accept abstract art, even though it will hurt my soul. No offense to abstract artists, but I prefer even like Pollock paintings to taped bananas. But oh well. I still would prefer the taped banana over doing something crazy like they're an artist because they pick flowers and then smell them and can identify them by smell. That's not
What if
in art.
What
So right, you're not creating something like that's cool.
What
But
if
you're not creating something. Yes,
what
question.
if I make them tape the banana to the wall because they actually they love using duct tape so much that they kind of just tape random things to the wall, and then they like took a picture of it and sent it to their friend because they thought it was funny, and then their friend sent it to their friend, and then it just got sent to so many people, and eventually someone posted it, and then they got famous, and they were like, I didn't even mean to do this.
I think the discovery in that one would be people are easily entertained. But anyway,
Only
but
the bread
I think-
falling.
That is
yeah,
true.
don't go too off the mark though. If you go too off the mark and are like, yes, a serial killer is an artist. No, I will dock you points. I've already had someone ask me about that. I will dock
What?
you points. I will say no. That's not an art. That's just creepy. So, if you, but yeah, so think classically. I'm not like within normal art, please. But also you can expand. You don't have to just do painting or drawing or whatever. I'm gonna turn off the video now, and we will have writing time.